Government?
I have to say.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's not.
I mean, it's still a sick test.
That's it.
Dude, I literally
From what I've
spent.
heard, that's one of the easier
I
ones,
spent
though.
Yeah, that's the one left.
I spent 15 minutes on the U.S. history one last year. We got like 100. It was the easiest thing I've ever done.
I got
You know who got it perfect?
Yeah, you
Yeah, well,
always do.
thanks.
For the government, the U.S. How do you guys
Yep.
U.S. history?
I'm talking about the U.S. history.
Government will be.
I am in government right now.
You know it's easy.
Alright, so let's take a look at something like this, right? This is what we did yesterday, right? A problem like this. So this is our story problem. It says the moon orbits the Earth in 29.5 days. The portion of the moon we're denoting as F, visible from the Earth, X days after the new moon is given by this equation here. So F is the percentage of the moon visible. X is the number of days after the new moon. We want to figure out the number of days after the new moon when 75% of the moon is visible. Okay. So we're going to plug 0.75, okay, for 75% in here for F and solve this equation. So what would the first thing I need to do here be? Subtract the 0.5 over. So I think I'll have enough room over here. So if I subtract the 0.5 over, we'll be at 0.25 equals 0.5 sine of pi over 14.75. Right, that one. Divide that 0.5 over. Yep. So 1/4 divided by 0.5. So 1/8. Oh no, it's not. Sorry. That would be times 0.5. If we're dividing by 0.5, that would be the same as multiplying by 2. Right? So if I divide both sides by 0.5, that would be 1/2. 0.25 or 1/4 divided by 1/2 would be 1/2. So we still have all this on the inside. 14.75 times x minus 14.75 over 2. So now we have our trig function by itself. We have sine by itself. So now we want to go to the unit circle and see where sine is equal to 1/2. So where is sine equal to 1/2? So we can take everything that's on the inside here and set that equal to pi over 6 plus 2 pi n and 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. So we'll have two separate equations here. Pi over 14.75 times x minus 14.75 over 2 equals pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. Right, and then I don't have enough room here. I'll write the other one in a second, but we would have this then again equals 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. So now let's solve this for x. Now we can kind of just write this out so that we can plug it into the calculator in a little bit. We don't have to actually multiply each of these values through and everything. So what I would do first to get rid of this pi over 14.75, I would multiply both sides by the reciprocal of that. And so I'll multiply multiply both sides by 14.75 over pi. That would cancel out over here. So times 14.75 over pi. So now we just have x minus 14.75 over 2 equals pi over 6 plus 2 pi n times 14.75 over pi. And then finally, to get x by itself, I would add this 14.75 over 2 to the other side. So we would end up with pi over 6 plus 2 pi n times 14.75 over pi plus 14.75 over 2. Right now we could simplify this, but we don't need to because we're just going to plug this all into a calculator. If I start by plugging in 0 for n, right? We would just have pi over 6 times 14.75 over pi plus 14.75 over 2. So type that into the calculator here. We first plug in 0 for n. What do we get? .83 repeating. The 3 repeating or the 8 3? Okay. Is that what everybody else got? So that means that about at about 10 days after the new moon, 75% of the moon is visible. Right? So what if we plug in n equals 1? Okay, so now we would have pi over 6 plus 2 pi times 14.75 over pi plus 14.75 over 2. What would we get for that? $39.3. So, for n equals 1, that is outside of our range, right? Because the problem says the moon orbits the Earth in 29.5 days. So, this wouldn't be a legit answer. We only get one answer out of that first part of the problem. But remember, we had another solution that I didn't write up here yet. We had 5 pi over 6. So, if we put 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n here, we would end up getting this same equation here, just with 5 pi over 6 instead of pi over 6. So I'm just going to skip to that step. Say we'll also have 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n times 14.75 over pi plus 14.75 over 2. So now let's start with n equals 0. So then I would have 5 pi over 6 times 14.75 over pi plus 14.75 over 2. What would we get for that if we plug in n equals 0?
I got 19.6.
I think that's what we should get. So we would get is 19.6 repeating or
Yeah.
Right, so at about 10 days after and about 20 days after the new moon, 75% of the moon is visible. Okay? I think it's pretty obvious if when we plugged in n equals 1 for this one, we get a number over 29.5. We would also get a number over 29.5 here if we plugged in n equals 1. Okay? So we get two answers. 9.83 days, 19.67 days. We okay with something like that? I mean, the equation was uglier, but it was still the exact same thing as what we did yesterday. Right? Get the trig function by itself, go to the unit circle and see where the trig function equals the unit circle. Set whatever's on the inside of the trig function equal to that angle. Solve for x. Okay. Questions? All right, then that's pretty much it for this chapter.